Okay, so for this fourth module, we're looking at FASD, which is fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I've got a lot to say, so I'm going to try to get through this quick. I didn't know much about FASD. I grew up in a family. My dad's a preacher. There was no alcohol in our family and any within our family system. So I really didn't know much about fetal alcohol, syndrome, or that there's this, common assumption that fetal alcohol exposure leaves visual clues or a specific face that makes the disability easy to spot. And that typically comes from standard medical descriptions or societal stereotypes that heavily focuses on such physical features of a more classic fetal alcohol syndrome presentation, rather than understanding that there's invisible variations across the spectrum of fetal alcohol disorders. The second prompt, how understanding changed and what surprised me since the module. I think challenging the idea of visual differences as a perceived baseline understanding, like learning that there is no single face for FASD, and that most people on the spectrum have no facial features or visible signs at all. So kind of interesting on the PowerPoint there with the images of people. It's surprising to learn. I think that FASD is defined by how it impacts a person's function across, different life domains, cognition, communication, and adaptive skills. And how the materials this week reframe, clinical interpretation by showing that what looks like willful defiance, manipulation, or laziness is actually a direct expression of a neurodevelopmental challenge and neurological overload related to FASD. And that the standard reward-based behavior systems like operant conditioning can fail clients because a client with FASD may succeed one day but lack the brain consistency to reliably show up and use the same skill the next, which is something I see show up in my therapy office most often, associated with trauma and other upbringing challenges, which could include FASD. Coming to the third prompt, why misunderstandings are common. It's largely because FASD is an invisible condition that easily mimics anxiety or depression or outbursts as mood disorders. Such misinterpretations, for example, like around slower processing or memory gaps, can be mislabeled as dishonesty, rudeness, or noncompliance on behalf of a client. And these misinterpretations can cause clients to be misidentified with conduct disorder or personality disorders, or result in school discipline or ODD, a breakdown of trust, other systemic issues that young children or adults can also face. The justice and child welfare systems that can really harm a lot of families. So, especially in marginalized communities, biased assumptions about race or parenting or discipline, can cloud clinical judgment and, cause some providers to miss neurodevelopmental roots, and then leaving those families, feeling unsupported. So it's important as counselors, we must aim to support beyond the symptom level and understand root causes of a client's distress or suffering in our roles as counselors. And then for the fourth prompt, why accurate recognition and responses matter. In our roles as counselors, recognizing FASD is critical because clients can face increased vulnerability to substance use disorders due to that natal alcohol damage to brain systems like executive functioning that manage impulse control, emotional regulation, and decision making. And because of how a client's brain can process risk and reward, they may struggle at times, to link substance use with negative consequences, meaning they will repeat high risk behaviors again, not by choice, but because they're neurobiologically driven, and because disrupting that pattern is hard work that changes over time through new experiences and neuroplasticity. So if a counselor can recognize these patterns, then we can also stop reinforcing any lifelong cycles that clients might face around blame, rejection, and emotional harm. And instead creating space for treatment, that emphasizes structure, repetition, and relational support and consistency. It's key to understand not to judge clients, and rather how using our clinical observation skills allows us to change the lens from lowering standards of care to providing equitable care and supporting clients when facing years of internalized failure, help restore their sense of dignity while also building relational safety and stability for them. Thank you.